Hey, I'm Emily, I said, somewhat awkwardly extending my hand at a small get-together where I first laid eyes on Alex. He was a mutual friend's acquaintance, and there was something immediately approachable about him. Alex, he responded, his handshake firm and friendly. So, you're the financial analyst Sarah keeps talking about? I laughed, a bit embarrassed. Yep, that's me. And you're the guy who owns a restaurant and loves hiking? He smiled, and his eyes lit up. Absolutely. Nothing tops a good hike. You a fan? Totally, I replied. Our conversation flowed effortlessly from there, delving into our shared passions for outdoor adventures and favorite hiking spots. What started as casual meetings soon blossomed into something more. Dates followed, each one feeling more natural than the last. We discovered a comfortable rhythm together, finding joy in our shared interests. It felt like Alex and I had known each other for ages. One evening, after a particularly enjoyable hike, Alex stopped and looked at me intently. Emily, this might sound crazy, but I think what we have is pretty special. Do you feel it too? My heart raced, but I couldn't hide my smile. I do, Alex. It's like we were meant to meet. Fast forward a year, and we were exchanging vows in a simple but heartfelt wedding ceremony. Just us, our families, and a few close friends. Afterwards, we moved into the house I inherited from my grandmother. It wasn't a modern building, but it had a warmth and charm to it. I remember watching Alex as he first walked through the house. He wandered from room to room, absorbing every detail. This house has character, Em, he said with a smile. It feels like a home. I was relieved. I'm glad you think so. I was worried it might seem too old-fashioned for you. Alex laughed heartily. Old-fashioned? No way. It's perfect. It's us. Living in the house I inherited from my grandma was like stepping back in time. Every creaky floorboard and the slightly faded wallpaper told a story. Alex and I loved it, but I was nervous about his mom's first visit. Mrs. Carter, with her taste for all things new and expensive, was a stark contrast to our humble abode. The day she arrived, she stepped into the living room, her high heels clicking sharply on the wooden floor. She looked around with a barely concealed frown. Oh, this is where you live, she said, her tone dripping with skepticism. It's quaint. I clenched my jaw, feeling a sting from her words. Alex gave my hand a reassuring squeeze, communicating his support. Yeah, Mom, isn't it great? Emily's really made it feel like home. Mrs. Carter raised an eyebrow, her gaze sweeping across the room. Well, it's certainly quaint. But, darling, you could do so much better. Alex squeezed my hand, a silent show of support. I appreciated his gesture, but Mrs. Carter's words stung. I loved this house, every imperfection and memory it held. The conversation shifted to dinner plans, but Mrs. Carter's comments lingered in my mind. So, Emily, what are we having? I assume we're dining in tonight? I nodded, trying to sound upbeat. Yes, I thought I'd cook something special. A family recipe. Oh, how domestic, she remarked, a hint of sarcasm in her voice. I hope it's up to standard. Dinner was an awkward affair. I could feel Mrs. Carter's eyes judging every aspect of the meal. Alex did his best to keep the conversation light, but the tension was palpable. After dinner, as we sat in the living room, Mrs. Carter's critique continued. Alex, really, this place could use some updating. Why don't you move somewhere more modern? Alex, trying to keep the peace, replied, Mom, we've talked about this. Emily and I love it here. It's our first home together. Mrs. Carter sighed dramatically. Well, I suppose if you're happy. But really, think about your future. This place is hardly suitable for a family. I bit my tongue, feeling my patience wearing thin. This house was more than just walls and a roof to me. It was a part of my family's history, a piece of my heart. As she finally left, I felt a mixture of relief and frustration. Alex wrapped his arms around me, whispering, "Don't let her get to you, Em. This is our home, and I wouldn't change a thing." I leaned into his embrace, grateful for his support, but dreading the thought of future visits. Mrs. Carter's words echoed in my mind, but I was determined not to let her snide remarks tarnish the love and memories this old house held for us. The evening air was cool as Alex walked through the door, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen him. The restaurant, his lifelong dream, was now a source of endless worry. I could see the stress etched in the lines of his face. "Another rough day?" I asked, handing him a cup of coffee. He slumped into a chair at our kitchen table, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, it's just, nothing's working, Em. I don't know how much longer I can keep the doors open." I sat across from him, my mind racing for ways to help. "Have you looked into the finances thoroughly? Maybe there's a leak somewhere, something you've missed?" Alex let out a humorless laugh. "Finances were never my strong suit. I'm a chef, not an accountant." A thought struck me. "Well, I could give it a try. I'm no expert in restaurant finances, but I know my way around numbers." He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. "You'd do that? For me? For the restaurant?" "Of course," I replied, feeling a mix of nervousness and determination. "Let's see what we can find." The following morning, I dived into the restaurant's accounts. Receipts, invoices, and spreadsheets were spread across our dining table. It was worse than I'd feared. Expenses were sky high, and the income wasn't tracked properly. Later that evening, I presented my findings to Alex. "Okay, here's the deal. Your food costs are through the roof. You're spending a fortune on imported ingredients that you can easily substitute with local ones." Alex leaned in, scrutinizing the papers. "But won't that change the taste?" I shook my head. "Not necessarily. It's about being smart with choices. Plus, your menu prices, they're too low. You're undervaluing your dishes." He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "I always wanted to make it affordable. But I see your point. And there's more," I continued, pointing to another column. "These miscellaneous expenses, fancy napkins, expensive cleaning services. You can cut back without compromising quality." The weeks that followed were a blur of activity. Alex revamped the menu, striking a balance between cost and quality. I negotiated with suppliers, trimming down the unnecessary expenses. We even hosted a few special events to attract more customers. One evening, Alex came home with a rare spark in his eyes. He wrapped me in a hug, his voice muffled. "I can't believe it. We're actually making a profit. It's working, Em. It's really working." We stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, the weight of the past weeks lifting slightly. The restaurant was turning a corner, thanks to our combined efforts. But as I would soon learn, success comes with its own set of challenges, ones that neither of us had anticipated. Alex's restaurant was now buzzing with success, and with that success came a change in him that I hadn't anticipated. It started small. A new watch here, a designer shirt there. But it quickly escalated. One evening, he came home with a brand new, high-end smartphone. "Check this out, Em," he said, his face lit up with excitement. "Latest model. Isn't it cool?" I glanced at the phone and then at him. "It's nice, Alex, but do you really need it? I thought we agreed to be careful with spending." He shrugged, his attention still on the phone. I know. But the restaurant's doing great. We can afford a few luxuries." It wasn't just the purchases that bothered me, it was his attitude. The careful, considerate man I married seemed to be getting lost in a wave of extravagance. "Alex, we need to think about reinvesting in the restaurant, remember? And our own savings," I reminded him, hoping to spark some of his earlier practicality. He waved off my concern. Relax. The restaurant's making more than enough. We deserve to enjoy the money. But it didn't stop there. Bills for extravagant dinners and nights out started to pile up. Each time I brought it up, Alex dismissed it. We're fine, Stop worrying so much. One day, I noticed our joint account was running lower than it should. Alex, we're supposed to be saving for the future. You're spending way too much. He looked at me, his expression one of annoyance. Why are you always on my case? Let me enjoy my success. But it's our future, Alex. We can't just blow through the money like this. He scoffed. My restaurant, my money. I'll spend it how I want. I was taken aback. This wasn't the Alex I knew, the one who valued our partnership. I tried a different approach. What about contributing to the household expenses? We agreed to split them. He rolled his eyes. That's your house, Why should I pay for something that's already yours? As the days passed, the tension between us grew. His spending continued, and each time I brought it up, it led to an argument. The man I had worked so hard with to save his dream was now recklessly throwing away our future for short-lived pleasures. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, Mrs. Carter, Alex's mother, decided she wanted to be closer to us. The day she called, I was already feeling overwhelmed with the way things were going at home. Emily, dear, I've been thinking. Mrs. Carter's voice echoed through the phone in her usual, lofty tone. It's time I moved closer to you and Alex. This town is just too dull for me. I hesitated, gripping the phone a little tighter. That's a big decision, Mrs. Carter. Are you sure? Oh, absolutely. But don't worry, I won't impose on you in that quaint little house of yours. I'll need you to find me a nice apartment nearby, she said, as if it was the most natural request in the world. I was taken aback. An apartment? Mrs. Carter, I'm not sure if. She cut me off. Now, Emily, I won't take no for an answer. A small, stylish place will do. I'm sure you can handle the rent for a while. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'll need to discuss this with Alex, I managed to say before ending the call. When I told Alex about his mother's request, he just shrugged. I don't know, I'm a bit tight on cash right now with the restaurant and all. Maybe you could cover it? I stared at him, incredulous. Me? Alex, we're already stretching our budget with your spending. How can we afford her rent too? He avoided my gaze. It's just for a while, until I get things sorted. Come on, for my mom? Reluctantly, I agreed to rent an apartment for Mrs. Carter for 6 months. It cost us $2,000 a month, a significant hit to our savings. The day she moved into her new place, Mrs. Carter made sure to let me know her standards. It's smaller than I'm used to, but I suppose it'll have to do. You've done an adequate job, Emily. I forced a smile, trying to keep the peace. I'm glad you like it, Mrs. Carter. But things only got worse. Mrs. Carter started coming over every day. Each visit was a reminder of how different our worlds were. She'd walk around our house, her nose turned up at everything. This old thing is still here? I thought you'd have gotten rid of it by now, she commented one day, eyeing an antique vase my grandmother had left me. I clenched my fists, feeling my patience wear thin. It's a family heirloom, Mrs. Carter. It means a lot to me. She just sniffed. Sentimentality. I never saw the point. Each of her visits left me feeling more drained and frustrated. I tried to talk to Alex about it, but he'd just brush it off. She's just set in her ways, Let's not make a big deal out of it. But it was a big deal to me. Mrs. Carter's presence was like a constant, dark cloud over our home, and I was starting to feel like there was no escaping it. The weight of her expectations and criticisms was becoming too much to bear, and I felt trapped in a situation with no easy way out. Mrs. Carter's daily visits became a routine I dreaded. Each day, she brought a fresh wave of criticism and backhanded comments. I tried to keep my cool, but it was wearing me down. One particularly exhausting evening, as I was preparing dinner, she walked into the kitchen. "Oh, cooking again, Emily? You do know there are restaurants for that sort of thing," she said with a smirk. I forced a smile, chopping vegetables a bit more aggressively than necessary. "I enjoy cooking, Mrs. Carter. It's relaxing for me," she scoffed, leaning against the counter. "Relaxing? A woman of your caliber should be relaxing in a spa, not slaving away in a kitchen. But then again, you always were a bit plain." The conversation shifted when she casually mentioned something that caught me off guard. "You know, I stopped by the restaurant the other day. Alex has hired some new waitresses. Young, pretty things. Very attentive." A pang of something, jealousy, insecurity, twisted in my stomach. "New waitresses?" "Yes, quite the eye candy. I'm surprised you haven't noticed. But then again, you're always so busy with your little projects," she said, her voice dripping with insinuation. The next day, curiosity and concern got the better of me. I decided to visit the restaurant unannounced. As I walked in, I saw them, a group of young, attractive waitresses, all laughing and chatting. Alex was there too, clearly enjoying the attention. I approached, trying to keep my composure. "Hi, Alex. Busy day?" He looked up, startled. "Oh, yeah, just keeping things running. What brings you here?" I glanced at the waitresses, who had scattered at my arrival. "Just thought I'd surprise you." "Who are the new faces?" Alex shrugged, a bit too nonchalantly. "Oh, just some new hires. Good for business, you know." I forced a smile, feeling a knot form in my gut. Right, good for business. That evening, I brought it up again. "Alex, about the new waitresses." He cut me off, his tone dismissive. They're just employees. Don't make it into something it's not." But it was hard to shake the feeling that something wasn't right. A few days later, I decided to visit the restaurant again, this time in the evening. What I saw confirmed my worst fears. Alex was in a corner, his arm around one of the waitresses, laughing and whispering in her ear. The sight felt like a physical blow. I stood there, frozen, as realization washed over me. The morning sun was barely peeking through the curtains, casting a soft glow in the kitchen where I sat, clutching a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. The revelation of Alex's affair with a waitress from his restaurant was swirling in my mind, a storm I could no longer ignore. He walked in, his footsteps echoing loudly in the tense silence. "Alex, we need to talk." "About what I saw at the restaurant," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but firm. He just smirked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Oh, you mean the new waitresses? Yeah, they're a nice addition, aren't they?" I stared at him, disbelief and anger mingling in my chest. "Nice addition? Alex, I saw you with her. Don't treat me like a fool." He leaned against the counter, his smirk widening. "Come on, it's nothing. Just a little fun on the side. You know how it is." "How it is?" My voice rose in incredulity. "You're my husband. Fun on the side isn't how it is supposed to be." Alex took a sip of his coffee, his arrogance palpable. We've been married for what, 3 years now? Things get boring. I needed someone to spice things up. I felt a knot form in my stomach. "So our marriage is just some game to you? Something you get bored of?" He shrugged, his casual demeanor infuriating me. "Not a game, just life. I'm a man, I have needs. Needs that obviously you're not fulfilling." I clenched my fists, fighting back tears. I've been here for you, supported you through everything. And this is how you repay me? He laughed, a cold, harsh sound. Repay you? Oh, please. You've been a good wife, sure, but that's not enough. I need excitement, adventure. You're just too plain. The word plain echoed in my ears, a stark reminder of his mother's earlier insults. And what about our vows? Did they mean nothing to you? Alex rolled his eyes. Vows are just words, Em. They don't mean we can't have a little fun. Why don't you loosen up a bit? I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is not a little fun, Alex. You've broken our trust, our marriage. I can't be with someone who has so little respect for me. I want a divorce. His expression finally changed, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. Divorce? Seriously? You're that upset over a harmless fling? It's not harmless, Alex. It's betrayal, I said, my voice breaking. He shrugged, his nonchalance returning. Fine. Have it your way. I've been feeling tied down anyway. As I started the divorce proceedings, the reality of our crumbling marriage hit hard. When Mrs. Carter, Alex's mother, got wind of it, her reaction was just as callous as her son's. I always knew it would come to this, she sneered during a phone call. You were never right for my Alex. Too dull, too domestic. I gritted my teeth, trying to keep my composure. Well, Mrs. Carter, Alex is no longer my problem. He's all yours now. She laughed, a sound filled with malice. Oh, I'm delighted. He needs someone who can keep up with him, not a boring little nobody like you. 6 months after the divorce, I found myself in a place of newfound peace. The house, once filled with tension, now felt serene, a sanctuary from the past chaos. That tranquility was shattered one evening by an unexpected knock on the door. I opened it to find Alex and Mrs. Carter standing there, disheveled and looking defeated. Emily, we need to talk, Alex said, avoiding my gaze. I crossed my arms, feeling a mix of surprise and wariness. Alex? What are you doing here? And Mrs. Carter? Mrs. Carter stepped forward, her usual haughty demeanor gone. Emily, dear, we've had a bit of a setback. The restaurant, it's gone under. I frowned, processing her words. Gone under? What happened? Alex shuffled his feet, a shadow of his former arrogance. Things went downhill after the divorce. I may have made some bad financial choices. Mrs. Carter interjected, her voice desperate. We've nowhere to go, Emily. Our apartment lease is up, and with no income, we can't renew. I was stunned. You want to stay here? After everything that's happened? Alex finally met my eyes, a hint of shame in them. I know I messed up. But this is temporary, just until we get back on our feet. Mrs. Carter added quickly, yes, just for a little while. We wouldn't be a bother. I took a deep breath, the audacity of their request staggering. Alex, Mrs. Carter, after everything that's happened, you really think it's appropriate to ask this of me? Alex's voice was pleading. I know I don't deserve your help, but we're desperate. I shook my head, my decision clear. I'm sorry, but no. You both made it clear how you felt about me and my home. I can't just forget that. Mrs. Carter's face fell, her usual composure crumbling. But where will we go, Emily? Please, you're our only hope. I remained firm, despite the pang of sympathy. You need to figure that out on your own. I did, after everything fell apart. They lingered for a moment, a mix of disbelief and despair on their faces, before finally turning away. As I closed the door, a sense of finality washed over me. I had turned a new page, one where their judgment and betrayal no longer held sway over me. I walked back into my living room, the echoes of their pleas still lingering in the air. But as I sat down, a feeling of empowerment filled me. I had survived their scorn, their betrayal, and come out stronger. My life, once overshadowed by their presence, was now my own again.